If you're someone who is struggling with sight reading and you want to improve in it, in this video we're going to discuss what real sight reading is and what you need to do to become an exceptional sight reader. Hello everyone and welcome to Sweet Struggle. Good to see you here. My name is Evgeny Genchev and I would like to share with you my knowledge and experience to help you improve as a pianist, as a performer, as a musician, just boost that musicianship to the next level. Now let's start this video and see what have been the missing pieces to improving your sight reading skills. Imagine I told you about a beautiful piece which you haven't heard before. What would you do? If you care enough about good music, which I suppose you do if you're here, thank you by the way, you would most probably open your internet browser or one of your music apps and you would check it out, wouldn't you? Makes perfect sense. But a few years ago that wasn't the case. There was no YouTube, there was no Spotify, there was none of all these online platforms. I remember when I was starting to play the piano, the internet was very far from what it is today. It was very slow and it was very limited. It took about 5 minutes to get online. Seriously, I knew this sound by heart. Phones back then were as big as bricks. I guess you could say that for today's phones too, but back then they were actually also as heavy as bricks. I come from a non-musical family, so there wasn't any shelf wall full of CD and LP recordings. If I wanted to listen to something in particular, I had to go all the way to the music shop and actually hope that they've got this thing available. Or alternatively, I would have to go to the city library and hope that they've got it in their archive and it's available. You may notice that there is a common theme of hopefulness in both scenarios. Anyway, going to the library in itself was a quite complicated process and I don't want to bore you with the details. But long story short, here is the overall picture. I was underage at the time, so what that meant was that I had to make a registration in the junior department. The junior department, however, wasn't the one who had the classical music recordings archive. What I did in order to have a registration in the other department was bring my dad, have him register. I then had to learn how to fake his signature. Then I faked it every single time I went there, hoping that they wouldn't ban me from there and just tell me to get out. Because obviously I wasn't even close to the appropriate age. And all this was to go there, hope they've got a recording of the piece that I wanted to listen. Any recording. Cross my fingers that nobody else is listening to that recording at the moment. And then finally, if it was available and if it was cleared, I would take it with me to the listening room. In that room I would put on the headphones, which were certainly older than me, listen to the recording, and when I was done, I would return it, exit the library, go back home. Quite a lengthy way to get to listen to what you want, especially considering that nowadays you click twice and the music is already playing. Yeah. Now you may say, wait a second, why are you sharing all this information with me? Like, what significance does it make to my life and my sight reading skills? I'm saying all this because it has historical significance. Not my life individually, I'm just sharing my experience because that was mostly universal for everyone. The only alternative that I had to all this was to sit at the piano, open the music and sight read through it. I remember on weekends I would take new scores and I would just read them from cover to cover, just to experience the music and hear how it sounds firsthand. Nowadays, because pianists have so many other alternatives for them to familiarize themselves with new music, they actually don't need to sight read. As a result, since we don't need it that often, we end up neglecting it and overlooking it. People know it's good for them, yet they don't practice it and just complain they're not good at it. Sight reading has many benefits, but it's also great to be efficient in it. People just don't like doing it. It's not enjoyable, it's not pleasant. I guess in many ways you could say that sight reading is like eating broccoli. You know that it would be amazing for your diet if you include broccoli in it. But at the same time, you would rather have these French fries instead. You might say, but I'm learning new pieces all the time. That's sight reading, isn't it? To that I say, possibly, but most probably not. There seems to be a fundamental misconception about what sight reading actually means. So before we go on, here is a short definition. Sight reading, or also called prima vista, which in Italian means at first sight, is the reading and performing of a piece of music or a song in music notation that the performer has not seen before. It's pretty self-explanatory. Sight reading literally means that you're playing at first sight something that you have not seen before. At first sight. Not second time round, not tomorrow at 5, or not next week when you decide to open the score and sit back at the piano. So first sight, first playthrough. Otherwise the term could easily have been something like seconda vista. By the way, if you're wondering why Italian, Italian is one of the music languages, so lots of words and phrases are commonly used in the music notation and terminology. Concerto grosso, appassionato, scherzando, dolcissimo, molto cantabile, grandioso. Got a little bit carried away there. I guess we all need a little bit of Italian in our life. Moving on. So yes, it is possible that you might be sight reading the first time that you're playing through this new piece that you're learning, but it's also possible that you probably didn't. Since we have already clarified the pure definition of sight reading, we need to clear another misconception that might actually answer your question fully. The majority of people identify sight reading as a weak point of theirs because when they're learning a new piece and they're playing through for the first time, they cannot play it smoothly. There are a few things that are wrong with this, so let's break it down. I would say that when you're learning a new piece, you don't actually need sight reading. I know plenty of people who cannot sight read at all, yet they're excellent pianists and musicians. The most frequent scenario when you're learning a new piece is that probably you pick something that is challenging to you, something that presents new difficulties to you. Therefore, by definition, sight reading it should not be your aim. In fact, sight reading it may actually cause more harm than good. Instead, you should make sure that you read it slowly and thoroughly to make sure that everything is in place. Even take it hands separately if that's necessary. Go through the whole process step by step. Doing it methodically would actually enable you to avoid any misreadings of the score and creating bad habits. Now that we've got that cleared, let's clarify what is the practical use of prima vista and what do we need to accomplish with that first sight. If you're a session musician, it is quite necessary for you to have excellent sight reading skills. Since normally the scores wouldn't be given in advance and there isn't much budget that is allocated towards rehearsals, it very often happens that your first encounter of the score is just before that red light comes on. In such cases, you need to be as accurate as possible from the very first take. That being said, it is quite frequently the case that parts wouldn't be set in stone, so you might end up improvising or adding some stuff to it. As an extra alternative, there is always seconda vista and patching it up in post. Perhaps the most common occasion in which you would have to sight read as a pianist, though, is not in the studio. The most common is to accompany a singer, another instrumentalist, or a dancer. They would frequently ask you on the spot without giving you any time for preparation. There is almost no occasion in which they say, oh, no worries, take your time, an hour, 2, maybe tomorrow or next week, whenever you're ready. No such thing. If someone actually is that considerate to you, you should most certainly consider keeping them in your life. They're really special. Such instances will probably be the purest form of sight reading you will experience. However, what does it take for you to do a successful job in it? First of all, you need to make sure that you cover the basics. Keep the tempo and rhythm correct and consistent and play as many notes accurately as you can. No stopping. These are your fundamentals. If you manage to do all these, job very well done. Now, scores can be complex and music could be at a quick pace, so you might end up doing some shortcuts. You might need to skip a note or two, simplify a passage. It happens. As long as you play it as fully and as accurately as you can and you don't change it beyond recognition, Nobody would criticize you for it. What is crucial here though is that you keep the pulse going. If you stop somewhere, the singer may lose their entry. Maybe a dancer stumbles and, God forbid, breaks an ankle. Then the whole production is put at a halt. So you need to make sure when you're sight reading, you keep things moving. If you can do all these things and not completely overload your brain, then good for you. That's fantastic. By all means, then feel free to pay attention to all the other details that are actually in the score. That being said, I guess if you're watching this video, you're probably not a sight reading genius. And that's okay, that's totally fine. Neither am I, and I've never been. What you need to understand though is that you can practice it and you can improve in it. Just remember to eat your broccoli and enjoy the process. Things like that don't happen overnight, so make sure you put in the time and results will surely come. An example of a documented master sight reader is Sviatoslav Richter. His teacher Neuhaus had written in his book that Richter could actually play immediately almost any piece perfectly, both as a technical performance and musical interpretation.
He must have had no life.
What? Who said that? Actually, when you look into Richter's story, this comes as a no surprise, because in his early years he was mostly sight reading rather than playing. There's a bit of a historical background here. People used to gather at parties and play through all the new music, whether it's solo, chamber music or orchestral music. When was the last time you actually even looked at an orchestral score, or even a reduction of a score, and played through it? That's my point. So if you dedicated some time and energy to practice your sight reading enough, maybe you can also achieve similar results. Lastly, before I finish this video, I would like to give a quick note to any string players that might be watching. I see you. This is regarding something that happens way too often and needs to stop. If there is a trio or a quartet or quintet that your pianist hasn't played, yet you want to play through it, make sure you give them the music in advance. I cannot stress this enough. You have to give it in advance. No pianist ever enjoys you bringing some Rachmaninoff or Frank or Brahms or Dvorak 100 pages that they've never learned, you slamming it on the piano and saying, let's read through some new music. We've got almost none of the melodies and we've got most of the difficult passages while you're sitting there enjoying your one stave experience. Consider our feelings. Have some courtesy and warn us in advance. Being spontaneous does not work in these circumstances. And it's not that we don't want to play it, or we don't love this sublime music that has been written for chamber music ensembles. We're just not, Sviatoslav Richter. So I guess it's our fault. But don't make us feel bad about it. Just had to put it out there. For my colleagues' sake. I'm looking after you guys. And obviously I don't want to insult anyone. I'm just making sure and looking after all of you guys to make sure that you have a more enjoyable and pleasant experience of making music together. So there you have it, guys. I hope you've learned something new today, and I hope this video has actually helped you to dispel few misconceptions about sight reading. I also hope that this video can serve as a motivation for you to practice your sight reading, and it can help you to actually approach sight reading in a more effective way in the future. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure you click on that bell icon so that you get notified every time I post a new video. Let me know what you think about all this, if there is anything else you would like me to cover, or if you've got any questions, let's start this discussion below. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.